Optimism isn't sunshine and rainbows. It's fixing things, changing the way we fix things. It's running the world on smarter energy. Because if optimism never stops, then change can't either. GE Vernova, the energy of change.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. When you visit the doctor, you probably hand over your insurance, your ID, and contact details. It's just one of the many places that has your personal info. And if any of them accidentally expose it, you could be at risk for identity theft. LifeLock monitors millions of data points a second. If you become a victim, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year at LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Hey, this is William Tincup and Ryan Leary, and you are listening and watching the Practitioner Corner podcast. We have a special guest today, Jeri Hawthorne from Aflac, and can't wait to hear her journey, her story. And so, Jeri, how are you doing today?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
I am doing well. It's
Good.
bright and sunny here in Texas, and so we're not being hammered with hail, which is
It's always a nice thing.
It's always a nice thing.
That is.
It is.
I don't think Jeri gets hail in Georgia.
You'd be surprised.
You do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
well, I
Yes,
stand corrected.
Yes.
It comes across and just goes, not a good
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
So, Jeri, why don't we do a quick introduction? Would you tell us a little bit about yourself, introduce yourself?
Sure. Jeri Hawthorne. I am the CHRO here at Aflac. I've been with the company almost 5 years and have worked in HR either directly or indirectly for more years than I am proud to say. Over 20, under 30. I'll leave it at that.
Over under, I love it.
Personnel
I'll give you my
department.
over under.
Yeah.
And have worked across multiple industries and in the U.S. and globally, and have had a really, I think, when I look back on my career, really interesting, unique career. So I'm excited to I guess, share that with folks today.
Yes, for sure. Well, William, since you brought it up, Jeri, was it titled the Personnel Department when you started?
It was not.
See? That's
not
good.
titled the Personnel Department when I
Okay.
started.
Okay.
I get-
Aflac had a personnel department, but not when I was here. They had one many years ago.
Many
So-
years. And then you got rid of that. I get nervous.
Last
Yeah.
year. Last year.
We were talking the other day to somebody, and I said, when we go through, so J.C. Penney's at the local mall here, and when you go through to the restroom area, there's a door, and it just says personnel,
Yeah.
and it gives me the heebie-jeebies every time I walk through it. It just sounds wrong. It doesn't sound
good.
right.
Nothing good happens in the personnel
No,
department.
if you're in that, if you walk through those doors, you're walking out with a box or a pink slip, one or the other.
Room 101.
So, obviously, let's start with the current job right now, CHRO.
Yep.
You've seen the movement. Some people say chief people officer, people operations, things like that.
Yep.
Why CHRO? Why was that? Why is that important to you and has been important to you?
Well, why here at Aflac? It's because it's the title. The title of the job that I applied to and was hired into, I guess. But I've seen a lot of different titles. CPO, CHRO, head of people.
Right.
When I think about it, I think it's really the role to me is really about the person who is probably the most responsible for thinking about the people of an organization. And when I'm saying that, I'm saying, do they have the right skills? Are they well? Are they engaged? Are they organized in a way that makes the organization succeed? So I'm thinking about it through that lens.
Perfect. So let's go back in time. Let's just say 15 years old. What did you want to be outside of a CHRO? What did you want to be when you were 15?
So 15 years old, I don't even think I knew that this was a function back then. I think,
Nor did I.
Yeah, I think it was, that was like outside of the, outside of even my knowledge about what exists from a career perspective. I think at the time I wanted to be an attorney, but I don't know that I actually did. I think it was one of those, you were naming jobs that you knew. You know what a teacher does. You know what a doctor does. You know what an attorney does.
TV
so
shows.
I don't know that it's actually what I wanted to do, but it's what I thought I wanted to do.
Yeah, Law and Order comes on, LA Law comes on, and that's 100%. What you want to be.
Yeah, that's right.
It is kind of sexy. It looks fun. Looks like
Sounds interesting. Yep.
The irony is modern HR, so much of it has compliance and employment law. So you're way ahead of your time.
I was, apparently. Yes. Yes.
Where'd you go to college, or what was after high school for you?
Yep. So after high school, I actually joined the military. I was in the reserves, so I was not a great soldier, but I did it. And I'm proud of doing it. As I look back on that, I think, you probably could have been a little bit better at that, but I was 18. So,
what do you expect?
18, you do silly things.
Yeah.
But I did it. I finished. I was in the military reserves for 6 years. So right after I graduated, that's what I did. And then after I got done with all of my basic training, that stuff, I went to college at a really small private college in West Virginia called Wheeling Jesuit. It was one of the only, I had wanted to go to Georgetown. I wanted to go to a Jesuit university, and my parents said no to Georgetown.
Santa Clara in California wasn't on the list.
They wouldn't let me go that far. We lived in Ohio, so Wheeling it was. And so that's where I went to undergrad. And I majored in political science because, again, I was still thinking law school when I entered college. Yeah. And it was sort of like, what's the right path to that?
Where in Ohio were you?
Southeast Ohio, near on the Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania kind of intersection right there, I guess is what I would say, about 45 from Pittsburgh.
Not the Ohio State, but the Ohio University is somewhere down there, right?
Ohio University was probably about 3 hours south.
Gotcha.
Something of us, southwest, probably.
It's really good school for PR and
yes, great school. Yeah, excellent school. Yeah.
I lived north in Cleveland for 3 years when I was doing my MBA at Case Western. So
nice. I have family who lives in Cleveland. Yeah, it's a nice outside of Cleveland. It's a nice area.
Learned during that process, being from Texas, that I am not a cold weather person.
Yeah.
So
that's a cold weather area. Yes.
Lake effect.
Not a good place for you.
No. Yes.
No. Whenever someone says lake effect, I actually kind of start to kind of shiver because it brings back memories in bad ways.
Yeah. It's funny because we live in the South now, and my kids, they close school here if it rains, if it storms badly enough. I mean, that 100%. In Texas you get the storms. Mm-hmm. And it's sort of like, I have a nieces and nephew. They're older now, but when they were younger, and they would, they would have 12 inches of snow. And my sister's like, I just sent them out for the bus.
That's how we are here.
Yeah.
Yeah, schools never close here.
Yeah. My father was convinced that the meteorologists and the grocery industry were in cahoots. Because in Texas, conspiracy theory 101. So he thought that basically, if you want to know the weather in Texas, walk outside. That's how you'll know. Because it changes so frequently. Yeah. But in Texas, similar to Georgia, if it's just a hint that there's going to be bad weather coming, everyone
grocery
goes
store's
to
empty. Everything. Yes.
It's the craziest thing in the world, right? You would not understand this because of where you live. No. But if today, my wife says, oh, listen, AccuWeather says we're going to have snow tomorrow, let's just say. Everyone, the entire city goes to the grocery stores.
Yep.
Yeah.
That is a true statement.
No, we go out in the storm to get stuff here.
Like Philly, they're tougher in Philly. They're tougher.
That's right. Best sports fans in the world. I think I just touched a nerve. So where did HR come into play? How did you go from law and then transition and military and all that?
So graduated from college, had a couple jobs after college, didn't really know what I wanted to do. Ended up going to graduate school in social policy or for social policy, looking at, things like social security, social welfare systems in different countries and what governments did in other countries compared to how in the U.S. It's very much of a private market driven social welfare system outside of, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. And so that was kind of where I started down that path. And then I ended up getting a job with, at the time, it's Berlitz. I don't know if you remember the training
of course.
company.
Yeah.
Yep. So, or the language company. So they had a cross-cultural training organization.
Yep.
And I had gotten my graduate degree in the UK. And so ended up taking a job with them where we were designing and delivering cross-cultural training programs for people who were becoming expats, people who were being repatriated to the U.S., or for business folks who were working internationally. So that was kind of my entree in. So I sort of got into HR from a bit of a side, like a side entrance, I would say, almost from the vendor side of things. And then I moved into global HR, looking at expat assignments, global relocation, and kind of got steeped in that. And then at the time, got married, all of that stuff in the middle of it, and we actually ended up, through my husband's job, we moved to Denmark. He was working for a bank at the time, and so we moved to Copenhagen, and I worked for a company there, Novo Nordisk. It was happenstance that I got a job with them, and you may know them now because they are the makers of, do you know what Novo Nordisk is the makers of?
I know the company, I know what they do, but I don't know what they make.
I don't.
They were they've been diabetes care for years and years and years. Ozempic.
Ozempic?
They're the
Ozempic.
Ozempic.
Okay.
And the interesting thing about that is they because they care about their employees, they don't overwork people. The demand is insane.
It's an amazing company.
But they only produce so much.
That's right.
Because they're not going to overwork their employees. Where normal pharmaceutical companies here in the United States are like, hey, we're running 24/7.
Keep going. That's exactly.
Keep producing.
They're an amazing organization.
They are amazing.
Yeah, I was lucky. I was really lucky to get to work for them. And I worked for them for almost 4 years while we lived there. And then we got repatriated back to the U.S. And that was when I stepped out and took a little bit of time at that point, stepped out entirely for a couple of years. I did some project work, for folks I had worked with in the past, but really kind of took a step back, had small kids and, moving back, and just wanted to focus on that for a little while.
100%. So when you were doing the global work, there wasn't all the stuff, the technology and all the stuff that we have today, like paying people in Brazil or delivering some type of services to people, health insurance, things like that. Like all that stuff was in its infancy.
That's right.
How'd you do that? I mean, how'd you deal with the complexity of global HR?
Well, so I would tell you, so when I was at Novo, it was really expats. So we had entities set up in those different countries, and we were sending people back and forth. But I did that, what you just talked about, when I worked at a company called U.S. Pharmacopoeia. They are a standard-setting organization for generic drugs. They work very closely with the FDA. And when I was there, we opened up laboratories in India, China, and Brazil. And that really was we're opening up a lab in Brazil, in Sao Paulo, go. We've done the market research. We know it's what we need to do. We know this is the right thing. Now we need to go set this lab up. And so that was really the how do you do that and how we did it. I don't know if this is how you do it at the time. The internet did exist. So we did I would do a ton of research on vendors. And then, typically when you start working with some of the global vendors, the Korn Ferries, the Spencers, the Heidrick, they have relationships in those locations, and so you start to find vendors in those different countries. ADP, God bless them, they exist worldwide. My experience is that they're a very reliable payroll provider, regardless of where you are. But it would just be a matter of identifying the vendors, kind of the staffing plans, and then just starting working through sort of step by step with how do you set this up from a legal entity perspective? How do we hire people? Do they need employment contracts? How do we compensate them? How are they paid on a relative basis to the folks in the U.S.? So it was really, what I actually loved about it was about asking questions. I didn't know the answers, certainly. Right. I didn't know, you don't know the answers to those questions, but, it's really about knowing questions to ask and then kind of asking the next question. So, you don't have health insurance here. Okay, so do you have a federal or a socialized healthcare system? Is there supplemental health insurance? Do companies offer that? So it's really sort of there's the question and then the questions behind the questions that really inform that. At least that was my experience.
And because of your time at Berlitz, you understood cultural
It
appropriateness.
helped.
It
It
helped
definitely helped. It did.
because
Yeah.
you could go into Chile and say, okay, I don't know what I don't know, whoop, but I know it's different than Bolivia.
That's right.
So,
That's
yeah.
exactly right.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
So how do you go into a lot of people that will listen to this
Hmm.
are following a similar path at some
Yep.
point, and maybe they're going, it'll be different now for sure because there's
Yep.
tech
Yeah.
and other things to help. How do you go into a different country and build a team to ground yourself within that area to help you move forward and open up new locations?
Yeah, I mean, for the way we did it and the way I did it was, it was literally relationships. So, and the relationships started with the vendors. So identifying the vendors that you trusted, and kind of that came back from who are the vendors that I trust in the U.S. Do they have an entity in that country? So starting and building the relationship with them. And then what I found was there were a few key hires that we would start with. So one was, who's the site head, right? You've got to have that person, identifying the scope of that role, making sure that you're hiring the right person who can collaborate locally on the ground, as well as with, the team in the U.S. who's been sent there to set things up. And then for me personally, it would be now I need my local HR person on the ground. And once we got those two roles hired, the other stuff just kind of came in around it, for lack of a better way to say it, because those were the most probably stable state roles. And, at Aflac, I wasn't involved in this because I wasn't here, but we opened up a tech hub in Northern Ireland a few years ago, and one of my colleagues, he was really the site head and drove the whole thing, and he's a guy from the U.S., and we had sent him over, and his first hire was the head of that office, and then I hired the HR person, and then they filled in around it. And so it's interesting because I didn't know him, this gentleman Keith, at the time, and like I say, it was already set up, but it was interesting for me that, the tact that I had taken in the early 2000s was pretty much the same one that he took when he went over. He said, I've got to start here, and we're going to build around.
Yeah, and that was where my question was rooted was, is it the same, which obviously
I think so.
it feels like it is, and technology is not really affecting that.
No, I think it is the same, and I actually think probably now it's, I don't know that I would call it simpler. I would probably call it easier to find options than it might have been, back then, because with the internet, you can find so much more information. I mean, in the early 2000s, the internet existed, but I would say that it wasn't as mature. That's a great way to say it. It definitely wasn't as mature. Yeah.
Yeah, localization's what I've heard, right? It becomes a game of finding the gal or the guy in that space that's just really awesome, and then building from there.
That's exactly. Yep.
So when you came back after your break with kids and the whatnot, what did you do next?
That was when I went to U.S. Pharmacopoeia. So I went from not working for a few years to jumping in and traveling about 80% of the time. And I had two little ones at home, and my husband and I throughout our careers, we've really balanced. We've been kind of lucky. Sometimes it's been by design. A lot of times it's just been by circumstance. But so he had a job where he was able to work from home and be remote most of the time. And then I was traveling, and I always say it was probably one of my favorite jobs. It was just at the wrong time of my life, because my kids were so small and I felt like I was missing so much. So I was there for just a couple of years, and then ended up trying to find a job that was closer to home, where I had a better work-life balance. I was burning the candle at all ends, and felt like I was just missing some pretty significant milestones. And so ended up taking a different job that was a domestic-focused HR job at T. Rowe Price in Baltimore, which was where I lived at the time.
Isn't it funny how people view business travel as sexy?
Oh,
It's
yeah.
awful.
It's awful.
There's no
Awful.
glamour
Yeah.
to it.
I don't care
There's
if you're at the
no glamour
Ritz.
to it. There's no.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
sounds great. It
It
really
sounds
does.
beautiful.
yeah.
Yeah,
Wi-
you see those people who get to get on the airplane first and their automatic upgrades, and I'm always a little jealous. And then I think, well, what did they have to do to get that? Like that
That's right.
takes a
Yeah.
lot of
They
travel.
just traveled
That's it.
100,000 miles last
Exactly.
month.
That's it.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, well,
It's
it's funny. On the travel piece, I don't know about you guys. Food, the amount of food that I eat and the type of food that
Uh-huh.
I eat for the
Yes.
next 3 weeks after I get home,
a recovery.
awful. Yeah,
Oh,
it
it's
is.
yeah.
Yeah.
No matter
Awful.
what I do or how long we've been doing it, it's
That's right.
just
I agree with that. That's
bring the
funny.
buffet
Yeah.
clothes with you because you're going to
Yeah.
need them on the plane. It's just how
So
it is.
I want to go back to your time with services. Which branch were you in?
I did the Army Reserves.
Yeah. So my son's going to Texas A&M, and he's going to be in the Corps of Cadets. And he's already signed a 4-year. He's going to be
Nice.
commissioned after. You were early on in the, I'd say, desegregation of the military, if you will. Well,
No, we were still. It was. I was in the military in the late '80s, early '90s.
yeah. How was that experience? When I mean desegregation, I meant early in that process of men and women serving together in battle.
I mean, we served together, but everything was, depending on the, all basic training was completely separate. It was, it was still like
Okay.
it was
Yeah.
still
So
pretty
it wasn't
separate.
integrated. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, when I got into the, when I got into my unit, that was,
Yeah.
that was desegregated. It was men and women, and women were mostly at the time, at my experience, they were in nursing, medical corps,
Right.
they were in administrative roles, some engineers, some in communications, but mostly more in that kind of office
what I
administrator
thought.
roles. I don't know if that's the case anymore, and
Yeah.
I don't follow it as much. But that was when I was back in. That was the kind of the mix.
Did you do any HR back then?
I was a
touch
legal
HR?
specialist, so I was a legal specialist.
This
while I was-
legal thing. We keep coming back to
Yes.
legal.
That was the other. That's how I knew it wasn't for me, because I was like, yeah, this is not it. This is not it.
That's why a lot of people do internships. Is the
Yes.
same thing. Is to learn what you love and what you don't love. But it's
That's right.
interesting. It's actually probably served you because of so much of HR does come down to compliance and
It has.
to
It definitely has.
employment
Yeah.
law. So that's interesting. While you're on your break, sabbatical, whatever, how'd you keep up with what was going on with HR? I know you had some projects running.
Yeah, I had
But-
some projects, and I would say I don't know that I did. In full transparency, I mean, I really sort of stepped back to be a mom,
Right.
and I wasn't even sure at the time. Like, I wasn't even sure that I would go back. So it was one
Right.
of those that I had worked in Denmark. We were very, very fortunate that it's a socialized system, and so the childcare there was unbelievable. And then when we came back to the U.S., it's different than that. It's more expensive. It's you have to figure it out on your own. And so I really wasn't sure if I wanted to go back to work or I didn't. And so I did project work, but it was more of the I'll keep doing this, and then I ultimately decided to go back in, because quite honestly, my husband's career kind of took a left turn, and so we both sort of looked at each other and said, well, one of us has to figure this out, or both of us, like, well, how are we going to do this? And so I said, well, I can look, I'll start looking too. And I ended up going back, and I've worked consistently since then. I think I was probably a better mom, a better working mom than a stay-at-home mom. That's I just love my kids. I love
That's
them. They're
me too.
adults now. I love them. However, they probably like me better as a working mom. I'll just say it that way too.
We will make sure that we cut this snippet out
Thank you.
No.
and post
This will
it all.
This will be the title of the show.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I can relate, because when I was traveling pre-COVID, my kids loved it. They loved seeing me, weekends, this, that, and the other. And through COVID, Man, I think they would like for me to be on a plane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
it's almost like too
Hey,
much.
We're
So,
Jerry, we're getting ready to travel next week. We're doing
yeah.
live shows. The first thing they do, they planned it already. They go
Yeah.
out to eat when I'm gone. The very
That's,
first night that I'm gone, and I don't know how to take that.
yeah.
I'm kind of like, that's a
You should take it.
celebration.
Celebration. It's
That is a celebration. Like if you go out the third day that I'm gone, okay, you just didn't plan dinner.
that's right.
This is the first night.
Yeah.
No,
This
it's
is a
celebration.
celebration.
Or
He's
you
not
could flip it
here.
on its head and you could say, well, they have to do something fun so that they're not sad.
Ah,
See, I like that better.
silver linings.
Uh
There
huh.
you go.
Yeah.
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 The
Go with
pace
that.
of the pace of HR now,
Ooh.
especially the technology, but it really kind of deals with candidates and kind of how candidates are different and processes being kind of more updated more frequently, et cetera. Just the velocity or the speed or the pace of HR. How have you adjusted to that through the time? Because it's like JFK had 12 days to evaluate the Bay of Pigs before he made a decision.
Yeah.
Today he'd have 8 seconds,
Probably. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so different but similar in the sense of there was a time in HR where you could really sit down and think and be strategic and be thoughtful and intentional and all this other stuff. You still want to do that, but the pace is so quick now.
Yeah.
So how have you dealt with that? How have you come to grips with that?
Well, I will tell you, I like change, and so I think that helps.
It does.
I'm not afraid of, taking risks. I'm good, bad, or indifferent. I'm trying to be very measured with them, and in particular with my job, I'm very measured with them. There's the personal risk taking versus the professional and the role, and I think about those differently. But so how I think liking change helps because I have a higher level of tolerance for ambiguity
Right.
than people who may not like change, and so I'm very comfortable operating in the gray when it comes to those types of situations. Not everybody is. Some people prefer a lot more certainty. So I think that helps. Having said that, I also think, my background is exceptionally varied. I've worked in global HR, I've worked in expat management, I've worked in training and development, I've worked in talent management, I've been an HR business partner. And I've done, global comp and ben, and I think that breadth, I think it gives me a good foundation when it comes to looking at the pace of change and things coming quickly, because I think I have a variety of different experiences to draw on and to, kind of consider different options. And I mentioned before about asking good questions when you're doing global HR. I mean, asking good questions is critical when it comes to this kind of stuff. So you may have less time to make a decision and to move left or right. And I think when you're in those situations, it's even more imperative to ask good questions and to make sure that you're trying to maximize the questions that you're asking.
How do you communicate that change then down into the organization as the leader of all the people? How do you communicate that in a way that doesn't create anxiety among different groups of people? Because people take change differently.
That's right. And it depends on the change, right? If I was communicating that I'm giving everybody a raise, that's an easy
Email.
communication, right? Like those are the ones that people are very, happy to hear. I surround myself with people who have really different points of view than I, and I think that's exceptionally important.
Yeah.
And even before I came over here today, I had a meeting with the person who runs our corporate communications, and her style is very different than mine. And so we're getting ready to work through some things with the organization with some of our benefits, and not negative, but just different. And we've got an organization that we've had some leadership changes over the last year, the pace of change externally. So we've got a lot of employees who I would say are probably pretty saturated. And, my innate way is, well, let's go. So with her, I'm like, what do you think about this? here's what I'm thinking. Let's talk through this. So I have her. She's a communications professional. I trust her point of view. I also have folks. I've been at Aflac for about almost 4.5 years now, and I have a group of people who I work with who have been here 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. We have a strong organizational culture. And so I'll go to them, hey, we're thinking about this. Here's what I'm thinking about. Let's talk about it. How do you think this will land on this population? We have a global investments organization in New York City. How do we think it will land on them? How do we think it's going to land on the people who work in the mailroom? How do we think it's going to land on the people who are working in our call center? So I try to cast kind of a wide net to get different points of view and take an approach that's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all. So a great example is the organization made the decision about a year ago to freeze our pension. We were one of the remaining organizations in the U.S. Publicly traded companies that have a pension. Right. And so it had been frozen to new entrants in 2013, and last year we made the decision to freeze the pension. That was a massive shift for our population. The perception of that was massive. And even though only about 60% of our employees were able to participate in it because of the turnover and just since we had frozen it, it's the people who have been here the longest and the people who have the most history and the people who, have given everything to this company. And so communicating that change and our approach for that was one that we're still going through that is very, very, very high touch. And so we just had a session on Thursday or Friday last week to talk about here, we said we had committed to, we're going to communicate with you every step of the process so you know what's coming and what's coming next and what actions, if any, that you need to take. So we had a big session on Friday. We had almost 1,000 employees who participated in that session where we went very deep on here's a letter you just received, here's what box 1 means, here's what box 2 means. You need to take action if it says this. By the way, we're going to have these individual sessions. And I talked to my head of global investments, and I said, we're planning to have people from our pension, from our 401k provider, sit on site at our different locations. Do you want someone there? And he was like, no, we don't need that here. This is a different type of population. Right. Okay, perfect. We won't do that. So we're going to do this educational session for everyone, but how we're going to treat this population will look different than how we're going to treat the population that is, we have a group of people who sit on the phones, 8 hours a day and have scheduled, breaks that are down to 15-minute increments. And so if I want to help that person, I probably need to do that either before they start their day or after they end their day, but I want to make sure that I'm available at a time that is accessible to them.
Right.
So if I did the math correctly, you're either pre-COVID hire or a COVID hire. So
I was pre-COVID, but I started in October.
December? Yeah.
And I started in October, and we exited everybody in at the end of February, in early March.
Wow,
of 2020.
Task number one.
Yeah.
Task number one.
So glad you have all these strategic plans. Anywho, we're going to change the business model, and everyone's going to be remote.
That's right.
We don't need to rehash all the things and all the trauma. But I would like to ask the question of how did you recuperate? Because HR and all companies in the United States, all over the world, they were leaned on heavily, especially the comms department, but everyone in HR was just, and I think they did an exceptional job by and large of just getting their organizations to a place that they never even considered. But then there was also, towards the end of that year, 20 and into 21, there was a high burnout.
Yeah.
Because people had just intellectually, emotionally, and otherwise. So
yes, just exhausted.
Exhausted. Because it's coming at you from every angle at this point. Now, how did you recharge your battery from that experience?
So are you asking me personally, or you're asking about the organization?
You personally.
So I am a big believer, I like work. So that's let me start there. I think that, in jobs, the kind of job that I'm in and the level and intensity that it is, you have to like what you do, or you can't give it what you need to give it.
Right.
But I think, burnout is something that started heavily during the pandemic. It is still significant. We do every year. It's called Aflac Workforces Report. Every year we've done this. I can't remember how many we've done, but we've done it for the last 14 years. I did a lifeline there. We've done this for the last 14 years, and we're still finding that almost 60% of American workers are feeling burned out. My guess is that was probably higher during the pandemic. I don't know that off cold, but I would assume because of myself. And I think when you're in a situation where you're burned out, and what I did in particular during the pandemic was you try to find moments of joy. And I'm going to talk about the pandemic, and then I'm going to kind of pivot. So the pandemic was a little bit different because everybody was locked down, right? And so there was a novelty. I don't know if you all experienced it, but in the beginning there was the novelty of the, hey, you want to do charades, a virtual charades game? Yeah, let's do a virtual happy hour. Let's, let's do virtual teams.
Different recipes for banana bread.
That's it. Yeah, and I think people were really, they were trying to make the most of it. It was novel, but then as it dragged on, I think by the end we were all sort of like, can I please stop looking at myself for 8 hours a day on a screen 100%. And I feel like I'm not stopping working and it all is bleeding together. And so I would tell you, during the pandemic, I made a point of, it sounds silly, but walking every day. I made a point of, some sort of physical exercise. I was one of the thousands of people who got on the wait list for the Peloton and got a Peloton. So that I think physical exercise is absolutely critical. It helps me personally. So making sure that I was getting some form of physical exercise. I made sure that I tried to read something that was not work related every day. And I tried to just disconnect from work. My kids were teenagers, and so I was kind of, I think, Ryan, I think, Ryan, you may have said it, like, where they don't really care if I'm there or not. Like, they were sort of like, so I wasn't one of those people who I didn't have to make sure that homework was being done or that they were logged in. And, and I'm fortunate. I don't know how those parents did it, quite frankly. God bless them all, and God bless all the teachers who did that and kept the educational system moving during that time, because I don't know how they did it. And if my kids had been small, I don't know what I would have done, because I'm a good working parent. Yeah. Right. So that was really it for me. And I would tell you that I've kind of carried that through even now, because my job is intense. And, so 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, I'm pretty rigid. I'm in the office before 7. I usually leave around 6. I make my meals on Sunday, my husband and I, so we cook for the week. So when, we eat, I get home, we eat, I walk the dog, I exercise, I read for 15 minutes, something non-work related at least. And then I usually maybe watch a half an hour of some Netflix, something just to disconnect. I'm a little bit of a Bravo fan, just small,
just a tiny
because
bit.
It makes me feel a little bit better about myself. So I watch a little Bravo.
It does. Whatever's on there.
Reaffirm that I'm average.
100%.
I'm just an average person, And then I decompress on weekends. But I take PTO. I encourage my team to take PTO. Take time off. And that was during the pandemic. That was a big thing too, that we found nobody was taking PTO. Everybody was just, I'm going to work for 8 hours, but it's just upstairs. And so it was take PTO, take time, disconnect, completely disconnect. I think that's really, really important. And I definitely, I try to do that. I try to encourage my team to do that, because especially in the HR world, you talked about it, William, that people are, HR really kind of help to carry organizations through. And one of the things that we, with my team, really tried to do was to say, if we're not taking care of ourselves, it's sort of like put your own oxygen mask on first. Right. If you're not taking care of yourself, it's really hard to be there for people. It's really hard to be at your very best for employees and for leaders in the organization and your own teammates. So I think it's absolutely, I used to think it was selfish. I don't think it's selfish. I think it's important in order to be fully engaged when you're engaged in your job.
Right. Jerry, last question on my side. I know William will have one as well. Where are you looking forward now in the area, obviously, of HR and people?
Yep.
What are you planning for in the coming years? And I know it changes so rapidly.
Are you talking
Yep.
about excited? Like what she's excited about?
Or not excited, just planning. Just
Stuff.
like what are you looking at on the horizon and saying, okay, I need to prepare for this, good or
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah.
Around the
And I
corner.
know it
Yeah.
changes so quickly, but
It
what are you
does.
what's keeping you up right now?
Well, I would tell you that employee wellness, I mean, we're an insurance company,
Right.
right? And so we want to be best in class with our benefits and our wellness offerings. And so for me, we have a lot. We have a lot. Our biggest area of opportunity is how we package, present, and make sure that our employees know what we have so that
Right.
they can access it when they need it, right? And
Right.
so,
Actually use it.
actually use it. So it's not, if we have all of these, and it's not just benefits, like it could be our learning and development programs. It could be, it could be our mentoring programs. It could be our, we have a daycare on site. We, if people aren't using the things that we're spending time researching as best practice, if we're putting all of these things together and people aren't using them for the fact that they don't know that we have it, or that we have it but they don't know how to access it to take advantage, then shame on us. And so it's one of those that it actually sounds easier than it is, right?
Yeah.
And myself included, it's that you have all these things and you want to maximize health expenses continue to climb. That's a massive area of focus for us. So we want our employees to be well and healthy, not just because it's really good for them as human beings, but
Right.
it's also, there's lower absenteeism.
Right.
Our insurance costs are lower. So
Sure.
our own costs as a company are lower. So, when I think about it, what I like about HR and my job in particular is I get to think about how do we do these things for employees to help them be healthier, be smarter and more capable, be more engaged, all of those things. And then I also have to think about it through all right, well, I got to convince my CFO about why I need to spend this money to redo the daycare, or to add this benefit, or to not pass this additional cost onto employees, but to carry that cost, but for us to carry that cost for our employees. And so that really is when it's something that probably should be, well, that's just BAU. And yes, it is BAU. But for me, that's sort of a low-hanging fruit that's not as low-hanging as people think. So that is and will continue to be an area of focus as we sort of move on. And when I think about my role and that of the HR organization, we try to think about, yes, we have to do everything that drives the business. The humans are what drive. We're a white-collar organization, so the humans drive our organization. And so when I think about them, I think about humans in a very holistic way, right? People bring themselves to work, as they say. And so how are they feeling mentally? Are they engaged? Are they burned out? If they are, do they know the resources that they can use? Are they engaged in their communities? Do they have opportunities if they want to do volunteer work? What's our stance on that? We have a good one. Let's make sure they know about that. Are they physically well? Are we giving them tools? Do they have access to a gym? Do they have access to an app if they don't have access to a gym so they can do things that they want to do? Are we helping them to maximize their financial benefits, right? So are they maximizing the 401k? When we made the decision to take the pension away, part of what we've done is a massive education about how can you better leverage your flexible spending account? How can you better leverage your 401k in order to save? So let's educate them on their financial wellness so that they're getting the benefits of that as well. So that it's really about we've got all of these great things. How do we actually move the needle on ensuring that they're being better used, and that our employees have access to them kind of in the moment when they need them, and not they spend $1,000 because they went to urgent care or they had to go to the ER. And by the way, had they gone for preventative care, 3 months ago, they may not have had to go to the ER for whatever, or whatever issue.
I love that you're thinking about adoption, usage, consumption, because every year you get new things that people will pitch you. And it's almost, and if you don't look at those things, you get bloat, you get feature bloat, you get benefit bloat. And a benefit isn't a benefit unless people utilize it.
That's right.
So you can have an EAP.
So you have to continue looking forward too. And, everybody talks about AI. I feel like every HR, article and, generative AI and what's happening with that and how will that impact the workforce and what are you doing as an organization? And that is something that we absolutely pay attention to and that we're mindful of. And how can we as a company leverage that so that we are becoming more efficient and automated in the tasks that are less customer impactful or that are more repetitive. So they're not the address changes, kind of those basic things. But it's not about, are we going to replace our workforce with AI? No, it's that we want to be able to pivot our people to actually focus on the more value add work for humans that they're dealing with, because we have, as an example, we have cancer insurance. So if you're dealing with someone who has cancer, you might be talking with someone who has had the worst news of their life. So you don't want AI involved in that. You want a human to do that. You can have AI involved in, hey, I need to update my address and I'm just a policy holder. I need to have this fixed. That's okay. But we want to have our people focusing on those really important moments for our customers. And so that's how we're thinking about it. But it's an ongoing conversation about what are we doing? How are we using it? Will it impact our workforce? How will it impact our workforce? How can we reskill our employees? And those are things that continue to be top of mind as well. Because I think it creates angst for employees. You hear about AI and people say,
FOBO, fear of being obsolete.
We're going to become obsolete. And I would say, we're not, no. I think that, people need humans. And I think it's about how do you purpose the humans to do the value of work that's the highest kind of emotional touch with other humans.
That's what Ryan and I have come to is where's that moment of humanization? And it might have been in a different place at a time, but where does it need to be now? And that's right. That's going to be constantly modified. Right. Last question, real quick. Advice you'd give your younger self in your first HR job. What would you say to Jeri?
I would say take on things that you don't like. And that's okay. So, I had a tendency to sort of pivot away if there was I don't really like that. I don't really like that. And as I got further in my career, I was less afraid of trying those things. And so even when I talk to our interns or our new hires at early career, I always say that go broad. It's important. I think it's important unless you want to be an actuary or something very narrow, which God bless the people who know that, because I didn't know that when I first started my career. Go broad and try things. And I would also say, roll up your sleeves and be willing to try what comes at you. Don't have a preconceived notion about why you shouldn't do something. Just roll your sleeves up and try.
Drops mic, waltz off stage. Jeri, thank you so much. We know how busy you are. Thank you for coming on the show and educating the audience, and thanks for the audience for being here.